Pet Sitting Nightmare by Sarahbobomb. To start off, I'm a girl who barely reaches 5'1", and at the time of this story I was 16. When I turned 15, I picked up a job at a local kennel just to make a little extra cash. I did so well at my job that a lot of people that came in asked if I could watch their dogs at home while they were at work or on vacation. $18 for every half hour? Hell yes, I'll watch your dog. I had one client that was going through a divorce and had to travel out of state every couple of weeks to deal with the situation. On top of that, he was completely renovating his house. I watched his dogs every weekday and whenever he had to travel. Almost every single time I came into his house, there were construction workers there. I should also mention that he had two incredibly adorable Afghan hound puppies that were probably 3 months old. One day, I get a call from him saying that he was going to be gone for a week, and he needed me to let his dogs out 3 times a day and stay the night at his house. I've done overnights with other clients before, but something about him asking me to sleep at his house made me super uncomfortable. He offered $100 per night, so of course my greedy ass accepted it. I never really felt comfortable in his house before, but during the 3rd visit that day, I decided to snoop around a little bit. The house has 3 stories in the basement, and I had only ever been in one room in his entire house. I moved up to the 2nd floor and found a room that had walls lined with metal cabinets. I opened one of the doors and see an absolute shitload of guns and ammo. I decided that visit was over and nope, got the hell out of there. My first overnight was perfectly fine. I brought my Neon Genesis Evangelion DVDs like the 16-year-old weeb I was. My second overnight is when shit got weird. At this point, it felt fairly routine. I just hang out with the dogs until 5 a.m. and go back home to sleep in my own bed. I locked myself in the guest room, which is on the 1st floor, and watched TV with the dogs while I eat some of my clients' food. I should mention that during all of his renovations, he added a new security system with motion detectors on the 1st and 2nd floor. Around midnight, I decided to set the motion detectors alarms while I'm outside with the dogs for their late night potty break. My client's house is surrounded with woods, so I usually keep the dogs on the leash and just walk them around the house. Once I make it to the front of the house, I hear the alarm blaring inside. My first thought was, I guess the alarm system isn't finished yet. That thought was quickly cut short when I noticed the light flick up on the upstairs. My heart completely sank when I saw someone peek out the window at me. Before I had a chance to get a good look at them, the silhouette vanished. In hindsight, I realized that based on the layout of the house, he was in the gun room. I scooped up both the puppies with one arm while I'm fumbling with my car keys to unlock the door. I set them in the passenger seat before manually locking all the doors. As soon as my car starts, I blast out my client's driveway. I get to the end of the neighborhood and come to a complete stop before dialing 911. I couldn't remember my client's exact address, so I asked them to meet me at a nearby church, so I can show them the house. I stayed at the end of the road in my car while they searched the house. Sadly, they didn't find anyone and there was no sign of forced entry. I kept the dogs at my house for the rest of the week. After that day, I never walked those dogs again. My client even invited me to do private training lessons with his dogs at his house. It broke my heart to decline. The scariest part for me is the fact that I don't know how long they were in there with me. I went in and out of the house over 8 times and didn't notice anything. Driving Someone Home at Night by Linkpemonade. I live in a very rural, mountainous area of California, and at this time I was working as a cook in a restaurant and/or bar. I was 24 and not in the best place financially at the time, so I had been borrowing my uncle's car to drive to and from work. I worked from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. I know everyone in this area well and I don't have a single enemy. I get along with everyone. One night I had gotten done closing up the kitchen and decided to have a beer before going home. The bartender was talking to a fellow community member and trying to get him to go home. He was too drunk for his own good. There were some out-of-towners that weren't too fond of the locals' demeanor. It seemed like it was getting intense between them. I just saw it as a local that I knew as being annoyingly drunk but perfectly harmless. I had my beer and went out and got in the car. I could see inside the bar and spotted the drunk local, completely smashed. I felt bad for not offering a ride home, but was tired from work and told myself he'll be okay. I drive away. Mind you, there's no street lamps, no buildings. It's the middle of nowhere. Pitch black. Quiet. I realized about a mile from the bar that I should turn around and offer the local a ride home. He didn't live far and it wouldn't be far out of my way to do so. I turned around at a muddy turn out and go back. I get in the bar and I basically was short with the local and told him that I would pick him up in the morning and he could get his drunk sober. That I'll give him a ride home tonight. I was 24 at the time and a small-built female. He was a smaller built 35-ish looking man. I knew this guy had hit on me in the past, but I assumed he was just a 35-year-old weirdo who was lonely. I always shrugged off his advances. Anyway, with a couple of minutes of reasoning, he finally hopped in the car and I took off, driving towards his home, about 5 miles away on winding mountain roads. I didn't notice anything really at first. He seemed drunk, quiet, mumbly. But not too long in the drive, he starts saying thank you, how nice I am to help him out. I say the usual, of course, no problem. Couldn't let him be there knowing full well he wasn't able to drive. This is where I started getting creeped out. I make a turn on the road he lives on. It's a long road, not many houses. All of the driveways are long, about a mile or two, so you don't see any of the houses. He gets really quiet and it's dark in the car. I can't see him really well. I notice him look at me though. I could see the reflection of his eyes from the dim lights on the radio. This is something I remember very vividly. His eyes gleaming kind of green from the lights on the radio knobs. He was just looking at me. I, without returning his gaze, said, "What's up? Why are you looking at me like that?" He says to me, "You're so pretty and I never get this chance to be alone with you." I shrugged it off, trying to play it cool, although I started regretting my decision. All of a sudden, he reaches over to me while I'm driving and tries to put his hands, I'm assuming, on my breast, but instead his hands land on my shoulder/neck area. I start yelling at him to stop. I slam on my brakes in the middle of the road. No one is behind me. There's no one for miles. And I scream at him to get out of the car, and I repeat it over and over. At this point, I had my hands off the wheel and I was trying to push him out of the car. I had leaned over and opened the car door. I had never in my life realized my own strength, my own weak strength. This 30-something's male was not budging against me. I noticed him laughing, a really sloppy laugh. He says, "You and I both know that no one is around." I said to him, "We just left the bar. At least 5 people know where I'm going. Please stop. Here's a flashlight. Walk on home. I'm done with you tonight." He is quiet for a minute before saying, "I don't feel like walking much." The way he said it scared the living shit out of me. I start screaming, not like a horse scream, but like an ear-piercing scream. I knew the scream was strong and loud, and I had hurt even my own ears. Just hoping someone had their windows open somewhere off in the woods. But nothing happened. We struggled for what felt like minutes as he kept trying to come at me. This entire time he was kind of laughing. He was drunk, so that was probably my only advantage. I was not. He was sloppy and trying to attack me for whatever reason. I pushed on him like I never pushed on anything in my life. I pushed so hard that I felt my arms just burning with pain. When he finally gets out of the car, I slam on the gas, not even bothering with the door, remembering I was heading down a long-ass road in the middle of nowhere, and not on my road. It's a dead-end road after about 20 miles, so I keep driving down this road I know well, knowing full well I will need to stop to turn around, but this road is like 1.5 lanes wide, and there's hardly any turns out. When I finally do, I turn around fast and in someone's dirt driveway, afraid of the car being still for even a second. I take off driving, know he'll be up ahead any second. I never see him. I never see him again. He was a local I'd known for years and saw frequently. I don't know if he took off to another area from embarrassment or what, but I never saw him again. I arrived home shaking, red, scratched, out of breath. My boyfriend and our friend were at home playing Jenga, and I told them immediately, and they knew who it was too, and they went to try and find him. Never saw him again. This was last November. Wrong Alley, Wrong Time by Skyline 2. Let's start this off by clarifying that I'm a 17-year-old female living in Kingston, Ontario, a usually calm and quiet city. We have a pretty populated university, so during the month of school, the city's crime and suicide rate typically skyrockets. I normally don't wander off on my own, especially at night, but this night I had just been lied to and was particularly annoyed and needed to get off some steam. I snuck out and decided to stick to downtown, where it's completely lit up and you only run into the odd drunk or creep. This night was unusually quiet, but it made sense, because after all, it was a Wednesday. I normally went out on Fridays. I got tired of walking around downtown, so I decided to stray off my usual path and explore the Queen's Ghetto, a name adopted by Kingstoners that made a lot of sense at that moment. When I made my way down campus, I couldn't believe how trashed the streets were. Red Solo cups strewn everywhere, couches ripped apart and thrown carelessly onto the road. Even full bottles of alcohol shattered across porches. I felt sick and decided that if it was this dead out, the alleys would be too, so I turned up my music and made my way into a dark alley, expecting to briskly walk through and end up on the other side of the road. As I made my way, I could already sense something off. Now, normally Kingston doesn't have druggies in the Queens area, but I brushed it off and assumed it was just my anxiety. Since my music was so loud, I didn't notice someone had been trying to talk to me. I pulled out my earbud as soon as I felt a presence behind me whipped around, facing a tall man who was looking right down at me, blood smeared from his temple and a needle in his hand. I asked him if he was okay, too afraid to run for the risk of him chasing me. I knew this guy was a heroin user, the proof in his hand right there. He just stared at me, and after a few moments he'd said the creepiest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. "Can you help me put my skin back on?" That sentence still sends chills down my spine. I was shocked. I knew this was a terrible idea. As soon as I turned around and opened my mouth, I didn't know what to say. What do you say to a guy that at least has 2 feet on you and is holding a contaminated needle in his hand? I stared back at him and moved away without making it obvious. I asked him if he wanted me to show him to the hospital, to which he shook his head and sat back down where he was before. I felt the weight lifted off my shoulders because maybe this was my chance to get away. But as soon as he sat down, he was up again, holding a bloody clump of hair. I had enough. I was disgusted and terrified. I told him I had to go and walked out as fast as I could and bolted to the nearest library. The library wasn't too far because I was on campus, and even though he didn't chase me, I still felt the odd presence I had felt moments before in the alley. I stayed in the library for an hour or two, trying to decide my best plan of action. I told my mother and father they would never trust me again, but I didn't want to keep it a secret. I still haven't told anyone but the internet, and I'm not sure what to make of the situation.